I would like to invite to the stage Raja Shehadehem and Ludwika Włodek. This talk tonight is organized within the 91st PEN International Congress, which was taking place in Krakow for the last 5 days. This is the last day. And as PEN tradition invites, we will begin with an empty chair, which will be presented by Małgorzata Szczurek.
Powiem parę słów o algierskim pisarzu, poecie, aktywiście Mohamedzie Tadżadicie. Mohamed Tadżadit, urodzony w 1994 roku, jest algierskim poetą i aktywistą. W lutym 2019 roku brał udział w antyrządowych protestach, znanych jako ruch Hirak, wywołanych wyborem prezydenta Boutefliki na 5. kadencję. Podczas protestów recytował swoje wiersze krytyczne wobec władz. Został okrzyknięty poetą Hirak i stał się znaną postacią tego ruchu, co spowodowało wzmożoną inwigilację ze strony aparatu państwowego i prześladowania sądowe. Od 2019 roku był aresztowany co najmniej 4 razy. W styczniu 2024 roku został zatrzymany w domu w Algierze. 2 dni później stanął przed prokuratorem pod nieobecność swojego adwokata. Został oskarżony pod zarzutem popierania terroryzmu oraz wykorzystywania technologii komunikacyjnych do wspierania działalności organizacji terrorystycznych w związku z wpisami i filmikami, które zamieszczał w mediach społecznościowych oraz z treścią prywatnej korespondencji. Trafił do więzienia. Wyszedł na wolność 31 października 2024 roku. W wyniku prezydenckiego ułaskawienia obejmującego 4000 więźniów, wśród których było wielu dziennikarzy oraz inna poetka i pieśniarka Hirak, Dżamila Bentoui. W styczniu 25 roku algierskie władze po raz kolejny aresztowały Mohameda Tadżadita w związku z jego wypowiedziami w internecie. 4 dni później został skazany na 5 lat więzienia. Parlament Europejski i PEN wzywają do jego uwolnienia. Chciałam teraz dodać parę słów od siebie, ponieważ to spotkanie odbywa się w bardzo szczególnym momencie. W momencie, kiedy izraelska armia dokonuje zagłady strefy Gazy. I w tym szczególnym momencie mamy z nami wspaniałego pisarza, aktywistę, działacza praw człowieka i świadka, Raję Shehadeha. Chciałam bardzo podziękować Raji Shehadehowi, że zgodził się przyjąć zaproszenie na kongres i przyjechać do Polski. Spotkanie z Radżą poprowadzi Ludwika Włodek, socjolożka, pisarka, znawczyni Azji Środkowej. Raja Shehadeh, jak Państwo wiedzą, jest autorem wielu wspaniałych książek, które przełożyła dla nas Anna Sak. Wymienię kilka tylko ich tytułów: Palestyńskie wędrówki, Zapiski o znikającym krajobrazie, Obcy w domu, Dziennik czasu okupacji. Dlaczego Izrael boi się Palestyny? To ostatni z opublikowanych tytułów w Polsce. Chciałabym, żeby Państwo teraz wyobrazili sobie 249 pustych krzeseł. Co najmniej tylu dziennikarek i dziennikarzy zostało zamordowanych przez izraelskie wojsko w czasie inwazji na Gazę. Symbolicznie podam nazwiska tylko 2 z nich, zamordowanych w zeszłym tygodniu i 2 września, w dzień otwarcia kongresu PEN Klubu w Polsce. 25 sierpnia została zamordowana Mariam Abu Dakka, jedna z niewielu kobiet, fotoreporterek, które działały w Gazie. Została zabita w trakcie ataku na szpital Nasser. W czasie tego ataku zostało zamordowanych również 4 innych dziennikarzy. 2 września W ataku izraelskich dronów zginął Rasmi Dżihad Salem. Wymieniam te nazwiska tylko dlatego, że nie mamy czasu, aby wyliczyć wszystkich 249 nazwisk osób, które zginęły. Ludzi pióra, którzy zginęli w trakcie tych ataków izraelskiego wojska. I chciałam powiedzieć, że dziennikarze nie są przypadkowymi ofiarami tej inwazji. Są jednymi z jej głównych celów. Chodzi o to, żebyśmy nie poznali prawdy na temat tego, co dzieje się w strefie Gazy i w Palestynie. Z tym większą uwagą słuchajmy dzisiaj tego, co powie nam Raja Shehadehem. Dziękuję bardzo.
Dear Raja, it's so good to have you here with us. And I would like to start with a very practical question, but it's a question which been asking, even people were asking me, how did you get here? How your life has been changed since the start of the war going on in Gaza, since the attack of Israel against Gaza, and even before the October the 7th?
Good. Well, you know, it's not easy to live next to killing fields, and Gaza is a killing field, and the West Bank is a place which has the right-wing government of Israel has given free rein to settlers, violent settlers, to attack Palestinian villages and wreak havoc to the hills and make it impossible for us to walk in the hills, to enjoy the hills. And so we are confined in our little town, and even the water sources are being attacked, and sometimes we don't have water. And so it's not easy life at all. And it's also, every day there is more news of atrocities and more suffering from Gaza. And we wake up every morning with more news of things happening. So this morning, for example, I woke up and heard that the Trump administration has imposed sanctions on the organization that I established 45 years ago, Al-Haq. And rather than, and why? Because of the Al-Haq is helping the International Criminal Court with evidence against war crimes committed by Israeli officials. And the same administration has lifted the sanctions on the violent settlers. So the state of the international law order is at stake and in danger, and this is a concern for all of us, not only for Palestinians, I think.
And how about traveling abroad, for example? Is it different than it used to be?
Well, it's different than because there are very few planes leaving the Tel Aviv airport, and so we had a hard time. We kept reserving, and the planes would cancel, and we ended up having to go to Dubai in order to go to Edinburgh. So we went east in order to go west. And so it's very uncertain. And we had to go to Edinburgh because we were part of the Edinburgh Book Festival. And it was uncertain whether we will be able to get there until the last minute.
Mm-hmm. And I also wonder, are you in touch with some friends or people you know from Gaza? Are you able to get some more in-depth news about the situation there?
Well, I am in touch with some, and some of the people I was in touch with who are working with us in the law office have left, mm-hmm. and they had their offices destroyed and their houses destroyed, and so they are in a terrible situation, having left with nothing. After what they built for many years, it was all destroyed. Mm-hmm. So it's a very sad situation and then some people are still there, but they have been displaced from one area to another, and they end up make most of their day searching for food and wondering if they will be alive the next day. So it's not so easy at all.
And those who left, where did they go?
Well, some people left to go to Egypt, mainly Egypt, and some people who could afford it left to Europe, but mainly Egypt. But then in Egypt they cannot work, and they cannot sometimes they cannot send their children to schools, so it's very difficult.
Maybe you can tell us something more about the contacts between the West Bank and the Gaza area, because since 2006 it has been isolated, but I wonder whether you were in touch, how different was the life of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and Palestinians in the West Bank, to what extent you developed different, let's say, cultures, to what extent the difference of experiences influences the way you look at each other, the way you somehow communicate with each other.
The Israeli policy for a long time now has been to isolate Palestinian communities from each other. And so the isolation of the West Bank and the Gaza has been taking place since after 1993. And travel from the West Bank to Gaza has been very difficult, if at all possible, since then. And before that, the area of the entire historic Palestine, Greater Israel, was open to each other, and we could all go and visit everywhere. But since the Oslo Accords, which were terrible, the isolation has been very strong. And so, and then it became much worse in 2007 when Hamas took over the control of Gaza, and it became entirely locked. Gaza became entirely locked. And so for me, the last time I went to Gaza was in 2001. And so I couldn't go after that at all, even sometimes when I needed to go for work. And so the two communities have not had, Birzeit University, for example, had a large number of students from Gaza studying at Birzeit University in Ramallah, near Ramallah. But now there is not a single student there at all. And so the two communities have grown into different trajectories, and the people of Gaza are resilient and very amazing in that they are able to survive anything, and they have built universities, good health system, and have continued to, before the war, of course, continued to thrive, even though they were restricted and in an open-air prison. And so their life is much more difficult than ours in the West Bank, but they have persisted and worked hard and done tremendous achievements, even so. And they have a sense of humor, which we lack in the West Bank. So, which is very helpful, of course, when you're in a difficult situation, to have a sense of humor. And
would you give us any examples?
I can't think of examples now because I'm dominated by the war and what has happened, and it's difficult to think of. I think they lost their sense of humor now because it's very, very, very difficult, very difficult in Gaza.
I think we are not hearing you very well. Could you just, when you speak, keep your mic closer to your mouth? And you mentioned the Oslo Accords, and I think it would be probably, we agreed that we cannot talk only about politics, but I think it's really important. You explain it in your books, but would you use just a few sentences to explain why do you call it such a disaster? And although in Poland, I remember in the 90s where it was signed, it was perceived as a huge success, although in your books you explained that it was definitely not, and actually.
Because a bad agreement leads to worse situation than before. And this was a bad agreement because although there was readiness on everybody's part to do negotiated settlement, Israel ended up consolidating the occupation and making it more solid, and dividing the area into three parts: area A, area B, area C, with area C about 70%, and area C was under Israeli control. And the Palestinians expected from the Oslo agreements that eventually the Palestinian state would be established on all of the area in the West Bank. But the Israelis convinced their people that Area C would never be returned to the Palestinians, and so settlements, which had started before the Oslo agreements, but were not very popular, became very popular, and settlers quadrupled in number after the Oslo agreements. So the Oslo agreements, and the Oslo agreements also made the right wing in Israel afraid of what concessions Israel would make to the Palestinians, and so they consolidated their efforts to stop everything. And in fact, now all the little concessions that were given by Oslo have been reversed. So even though Ramallah, for example, where I live, is supposed to be Area A, where it's under total Palestinian jurisdiction, now the Israeli army comes in at will. And last week, for example, they came in with tanks and into the middle of the town and started shooting, and because they were trying to get to the exchange offices, currency exchange. And several people were, one person was killed and several people were injured. And that's in the middle of the town and totally in violation of the Oslo agreements. So Israel has violated the Oslo agreement, even though the Oslo agreement is in itself not very good.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned that you cannot walk anymore, although your books, the one which has the biggest success in Poland, palestyńskie wędrówki, Palestinian walks, was actually about walking. So as far as I understand now, it's not possible anymore, yes?
This is something very sad, because we have had last few years, we had excellent spring, and because we had great rain in the winter, and in spring the hills are lush with greenery and flowers and so on, and so it's lovely to walk in the hills. And we have not been able to walk at all in the hills in the last 3 years almost, because of the settler violence, where settlers have militarized the hills by building settlements on top of the hills and by going into the wadis and the hills with covering faces and with machine guns and hurting anyone who's trying to walk there. And several people have been killed, even on walks. So it's very dangerous now to walk in the hills, and we have been confined to our little enclave of Ramallah, and we cannot walk in the hills, which is something that I miss very much. And so I have to go to Scotland to walk in the hills here.
Yeah, actually, so the vanishing landscape you were describing in your book is almost all gone, as far as I understand. Yes, the space is not. It's even different than during the time you were writing your book.
Absolutely, because then there were so many areas which were still possible to walk, and they were already virgin land which had been left untouched for many centuries actually, and now they dug roads and built settlements and destroyed so much of the beauty of the land, which is something that is very painful for anyone who loves the land, not only for Palestinians, but anyone who loves the land. And this process started long before the present time. It's one of the reasons why I established Al-Haq and why I started writing about the legal aspects. In '79, I realized that the Israeli government was changing the laws, the land laws in the occupied territories, contrary to international law, which does not allow the occupier to change the laws, and does not allow the occupier to allow its own population to live in the occupied territories. And so they were changing the laws and doing that surreptitiously without announcing it. And I became aware that if the process continues, then it will be very dangerous. So I started investigating that process, and writing about it in books that are legal books, law books. And then I realized that the law books reach only a short number of people, and so I thought that the best way to do it is in another fashion. And Palestinian Walks is an attempt at explaining the change in the laws that have taken place, but through a literary style and through describing walks, 6 walks that have taken place over 20 years and showing the changes in the landscape over that period of time.
Yeah, I think this is really important because as far as I know, in Poland we talk very little about settlements. And we kind of conserve this vision of Israel as a state for Holocaust survivors. Although you describe very well the process of like inviting people from different places of the world, and those people have nothing to do with Holocaust survivors. There is this conversation with one young settler you describe in the book, although you leave it unfinished. You remember the guy who went for a smoke and you just sat by the river. Were you did you meet him later for the second time or never again?
This is an imagined conversation.
Yeah.
What happened was on one of the walks I passed by a young man who was obviously Israeli from settlement nearby called Dolev, and he was smoking an nargile.
Yeah.
And I passed by him, and his gun was, his machine gun was resting on the rock face, and I was worried, of course, a bit, but I passed by without talking to him and continued on my walk. And then later on, I thought, what if I had stopped and talked to him? How would the conversation have gone?
Look like, yeah.
And then this is what I wrote in the book. So it's an imagined sarha. Sarha being the way of going into the hills for to walk without impediments.
Yeah, and how about your Israeli friends? Are you still in touch with them? Do you talk about what's going on in Gaza?
Well, this morning I received a very impassioned letter from an Israeli friend who was, with whom I was great friends since 1982, when we worked together on the first book of mine called The Third Way. She was editing that book with me, and we became very close friends and had continued the friendship until now. And she has been so concerned about me in the West Bank and about my state, safety, and she is so concerned about her country because she realizes that her country is doing things that are unimaginable, and she is so distressed. And in a way, the distress of people like her and others who are friends of mine about what is happening in their state is something that I feel very strongly, because they are helpless to do anything about it. For example, Michael Strad, the human rights lawyer with whom I've had a relationship for a long time, is very concerned about what Israel is doing in Gaza. And he continues to write articles exploding, really, about the situation and going to the court to try and do something about it. And he feels powerless because these articles are read by the few, and those who believe otherwise do not even read them. And so he cannot do anything. But I must say that when we look at the evil that is being done, we have to look at the leaders, not the people. Because the leaders who are really the guilty party, the leaders in general drive people into these terrible acts. And then that's the case in Israel. So in 1948, the leaders could have stopped the looting that was taking place in the places which the Palestinians were forced out of, in the houses that the Palestinians were forced out of. And there's a new book by Adam Raz called Loot, How Israel Stole Palestinian Property, in which he describes the looting that took place in several places, including Jaffa, where my family comes from, and who had left, were forced to leave their house in April 1948, and ended up living in Ramallah, thinking that they will go back in 2 weeks and never were able to go back. And he describes that they looting took place, and they looted and left nothing in houses of Palestinians in Jaffa. And in the book, he describes the different reactions of various leaders and officers to the looting. And some officers were concerned about what the looting would affect future relations with the Palestinians. And they say, what if there is peace? What will we do? And the leaders, like Ben Gurion, said, never mind, go ahead. And so they ended up looting and living in the places where the Palestinians left without feeling any guilt. And the same with the Gaza war. In the beginning of the war, the leaders, officers in the Israeli government said that the Palestinians are not human beings. And so anything that is done to them is okay because they are subhuman. And so the leaders usually are the bad people who lead everybody else to do the terrible things that end up being done.
Yeah, but still, I mean, people, these are intellectuals. So do you think they don't really have any possibilities to influence the society? Well, Israel tells about itself that it's the only democracy in the Middle East, so the leaders are elected by the people.
It so happens that the people elected a government which is now right-wing, and extreme right-wing. And Netanyahu, who is the prime minister, is so concerned about keeping his position and is doing the bidding of the right-wing. And so it's a very difficult situation to change, and these intellectuals are unable to make any dent in the... And then don't forget that Israel is a state with a citizen army. And the citizen army always feels that they have to fight because they cannot hold back. And so the number of people fighting in Gaza are tremendous, and some of them know that they are doing bad things, but they continue to fight. And yet the Israeli people in general are supportive of what is happening in Gaza, and 78% have said that the Palestinians deserve what they're getting, and so it's a very distressing and unfortunate situation, which is not changing to the better.
I would like to ask you how this war has changed the Palestinian society, also maybe the Palestinian leadership.
The Palestinian leadership is in disarray because there is no unity between the Fatah group, which is the main group, and the Hamas. And that's a major problem in the Palestinian leadership. They cannot get together and make unified leadership. And at the same time, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has always thought that they will accept a Palestinian state in the West Bank, and have decided against fighting Israel in any way, really, and have close cooperation between the security people in Israel and the security people in Palestine. And so it's a very big problem with but at the same time, the Palestinian Authority is responsible for education, for health, for social welfare, and they're continuing to do this, these important jobs. And so if the Palestinian Authority is lost, then there will be some consequences for the life of the people in the West Bank, of course.
And how about your circles? How about people you're friend with? Are you somehow changed by what is going on?
we have all lost our heads because we have become so worried, and every day we hear more massacres and more violence in the West Bank and in Gaza, but mainly in Gaza. And it's as if living with a stone on one's chest. And we cannot eat a meal without thinking of the starvation in Gaza. We cannot enjoy anything without thinking of the suffering of the people in Gaza. And so there is very involved suffering of trying to feel with the people in Gaza and do something about it and help in any way we can, by sending money, by making, and at the same time...
Is it possible right now to
very
send?
difficult, but always one can find a way. And then so many people, the artists, for example, have made great efforts. For example, in the Palestinian Museum, they made a huge exhibition of Gaza art, which they managed to collect and made a huge exhibition of Gaza arts. And there are another group called doing the Gaza Biennale, which has been now going to be in New York, also of Gaza arts, which they collected from Gaza. Had people send the artwork, and they have.
But how physically it has been sent?
Physically, it's not possible, but they do it through the
online, right?
Online,
okay.
yeah. And then, of course, they collect things that they were already outside because people had bought things from the Gaza artists outside, and they were able to collect what is available outside of Gaza works. And it was very touching when I went to the opening of the Palestine Museum to see one of the artists, picture of one of the artists whose artwork was exhibited, and she had died, been killed, and to hear how she has been killed and her artwork is still there, and it was very touching indeed.
Actually, I would like to talk more about your cultural background. What has shaped you, with what narratives and masters you've been, educated and formed as a writer, as a human being.
I have been interested in writing for a long time, and I have been keeping a diary of the occupation. On a daily basis, I write a diary of what is happening around me, and trying to understand it, and trying to explore it, and trying to document it. And so my writing has been very influenced by this diary, from which I go back and remember how things were. So, for example, when I wrote the Palestinian Walks and the walk in 1979, I went back and saw the descriptions that I had of the walks that I took in 1979. And so I saw, it wasn't only my memory, it was also, the memory was jogged by what I had written down in the diaries. And I have been interested in writing, and have been following writing, and following other writers, and I have interest in music, which I listen to constantly. And now with the streaming of music after the COVID-19, we can listen to music, live music from the Wigmore Hall, for example, in London. And so it's a great opportunity to be at home and to listen to concerts outside. And then I do gardening. I like gardening, and that's something that takes some time with me. And so my life, I try to vary my life and not to give in to hopelessness and despair, and be too listening to news all the time. I don't do social media at all, and so that saves me from so much distress over details of what is happening. And so I do one session of TV news only, and then I read texts of the news and try to imagine from the text how it is, and then try to analyze what is happening, because I write also articles. I'm often asked to write articles about the situation, and so I have to keep up, and so on.
Yeah, and what about your decision about writing in English? Have you ever thought about writing in Arabic?
You know, interestingly enough, I never took the decision to write in English. I studied in a school which taught English very well, and where English literature was heavily taught, and we read a lot of English literature. And when I started writing the diary, I immediately wrote it in English because I typed English, and I wanted to type the diary. Because my handwriting is so atrocious. If I had written the diary with my handwriting, nobody would have been able to read it. So I started writing the diary even when I was 16 years old in English, and never thought of writing in any other language but English. And so it wasn't a conscious decision. It was just happened, and I continued on that.
But were you ever criticized of being an English language writer?
Some people thought that I'm writing in English in order to make propaganda about the situation, which has never been my intention. I write in English because I like the language, I feel comfortable in the language, and my readings are in English, and so it's not in order to propagandize and reach out to the English. I try to reach all kinds of people, not only the English-speaking people. So yes, some people have criticized why write in English, but I don't see why not, because English is an international language, and you write in the language that you feel comfortable with. And so English is a language I'm comfortable with. And I like understatement. And English yields itself to understatement. Arabic doesn't. And then there's also another problem, which is my problem really, because other writers are better at me and able to overcome it, which is that in Arabic we have the classical language and the colloquial language. And the colloquial language, you cannot write in the colloquial language. So you have to write in the classical language. And so in a way you're translating anyway, because you're writing in the classical language. And so you cannot write the way people speak daily. And when I was in school, I tried to write in the colloquial for my Arabic teacher, and he said, "This is not Arabic." And he stopped me and stifled me.
But it's,
forever.
I mean, it's not, people don't do it. There are no Arabic writers who try to write in colloquial language?
There are some good writers who try, and I find it very difficult to read, actually. But, good writers in Arabic are very competent and able to produce very good works that are in between between the two, between colloquial and classical, or classical that yields itself to good writing. And so it's not really the fault of the language, it's my fault.
Yeah. When you were talking before the meeting, you mentioned that there is this great Palestinian youth, and that even sometimes you don't agree to talk about the situation because you prefer those young people to have their moment. Could you tell us something more about this? Those young people, yeah. What do they do? What are they interested in? What are the ideas and issues they try to convey to the world?
For a long time, I felt a duty to speak out at every occasion. So in the 80s, for example, every time any journalist or anybody wanted to interview me, I said yes and went ahead and did it. And it was very consuming, and it took away from my writing, because if you speak a lot, you cannot write. So I consumed myself because I felt I needed to, and there were very few others who were speaking. But now the situation is entirely different. Now there are so many young people who are able to speak and do speak and speak very well and are very articulate from Gaza and from the West Bank. And so I don't feel any compulsion anymore to speak as I used to before. And there are many good writers now, of course, from Gaza and from the West Bank. So from Gaza there is Abu Saif, Atif Abu Saif, for example, who has written a book called Don't Look Left, about his experience in the first 4 months of the Gaza war, in which he describes his daily life in Gaza. And it's very, very touching, and makes you realize what life was like in Gaza in an excellent way, and in a easy way, without exaggeration. And he says from then that what they want to us is out of Gaza. So he realized that they are after the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, even then. And then he left, of course. He could leave. And he came to Gaza because he wanted to be with his son and swim in the sea in Gaza. And he ended up getting caught with the October 7 and so couldn't leave for 4 months.
And then he left.
And then he left.
And where is he now?
He left to the West Bank because he was a Minister of Culture in the West Bank originally. And so he had left to Gaza on a mission for the Ministry of Culture.
Yeah. And those other people, could you name some other people, who they are, what are they?
There are great writers now in Palestine, such as Isabella Hamad, for example, who has written Enter Ghost and The Parisian, novels that are of very high quality and excellent novels. And there is Knock on the Roof, which is a play which is very good. And there is Asim Abu Taha, who has written Forests of Noise, poetry, and many other poets who are doing excellent work and getting published by good publishers in the West. And this is a change that has happened because in the past we could not speak about the Nakba, for example. We could not speak about what happened in 48 and that the Palestine was taken over by...
You could not speak because the West didn't want to listen to it,
The West didn't want to listen and wouldn't publish anything that dealt with the myth that Israel had formed around itself, that it came to an empty land and that
with no people in it.
with no people in it. And so all these subjects were denied us from speaking about and getting published. And the first time I was able to use Palestine in a book was 2002, when the Strangers in the House coming of age in occupied Palestine. And I said to the publisher, are you sure, an American publisher, I said, are you sure that you can use the word Palestine? And he said, yes. And we got away with it. But that was the first time, 2002. And I think that now there's a wide opening to publishing for Palestinians, because people have realized that they were told many deceptions about Israel. And that is why there are so many people who are angry with Israel and critical now of Israel, because they have realized the deceptions that they were told and the untruths that were popularized.
Yeah, but 60,000 people had to die in order the world understands.
A very heavy price, very heavy price. And it's still ongoing. It's not yet over.
Yeah, my last question would be about what we can do. We here in Poland, we all over the world. How do you think? Can you give us any advices? How could we help? Maybe this is such a stupid question, but
I cannot give advice because everybody has to decide for themselves what to do. But I can say that whenever I see and hear of people in remote areas in the world getting together every Saturday, every Sunday, and demonstrating, I get tears in my eyes and realize how solidarity with the Palestinians is going on so strongly. And the people in Gaza feel very comforted by this action. But then there's more to be done, because your government is supporting the war in Gaza by giving arms to Israel. And so they're supporting the genocide in Gaza. And that's something that I think it's very important to try and stop by any action, non-violent action that you can. And there are a lot that you can do, I'm sure, to try and put pressure on the government to change its policy. And remember, South Africa, it was the people in the world who fought against apartheid, and it took many years, and the governments were adamant that they will not respond, and they supported the apartheid government, and at the end they had to relent. And so at the end, they will relent, the governments will relent. And I think it's also important to understand that what is happening in Gaza and is not only in danger to the Gazan people and to the Palestinian people, it's a danger to all humanities all over the world, because there is a threat to international legal order. And the Israeli government is getting away with such violations of the international order, and if they get away with it and it becomes a norm, then this will affect not only Palestine but all over the world. And so it's very important to resist in all ways possible and to realize that what you're doing it not only for the people in Gaza and for Palestine, but also for yourself, because we are all part of this world, and the world is getting into a mess thanks to Mr. Trump.
Not only him.
Not only him, but yeah, but he's at the top.
But how do you think? Because well, you are quite pessimistic in what you write, and you've been mentioning that actually the international law has been violated for 70 years, even more. And how do you think this situation nowadays, the genocide taking place in the Gaza Strip, can lead to something better? Are there any chances this nightmare will end soon? How do you think?
Well, we have to realize that the dehumanization of the Palestinians has started long before this latest round. So in 1983, Raphael Itan said the Palestinians were like drugged cockroaches in a bottle, about the Palestinians in a checkpoint. And in 1948, the Palestinians were pushed out of their homes, and ethnic cleansing of Palestine took place, and they were replaced by Israeli Jews. And so this has been going on for a long time, and it will. And then the violation of international law, like the right of return, which is the UN Resolution 194, also was never implemented by Israel. And I wrote about this in the book about my father. We could be friends, my father and I, where I wrote about his efforts to get the UN Resolution 194 implemented, and he did everything he could in 1949, and to no avail. And until this day, this law is not implemented. And Israel once got away with refusal to implement international law. They continued on the track, and now they do not implement and do not respect international law, and with impunity. And they realize that they can go on with impunity.
Yeah, but something has changed. I mean, do you think the world has started slightly changing its let's say opinion about what is going on?
In a big way, in a very big way. Mm-hmm. The world is changing entirely. And what we see in the countries in Europe and even in America, mm-hmm, about the change towards Israel and its policies and is tremendous. And it was never, I never thought it would happen. I never thought I would see it. It is happening in a big way. And as I wrote in What Does Israel Fear from Palestine, what will happen to Israel if it doesn't recognize the self-determination for the Palestinian people is that it will continue to be a pariah state, and it will become a pariah state, and it will continue to be a racist state, because the important thing is for Israel to recognize the self-determination for the Palestinian people and live side by side with the Palestinians, as the Palestinians should live side by side with the Israeli people. Because we live in a small piece of land stuck together, and there's no way that either of us can destroy the other entirely. And this belief by Israel that they can destroy the Palestinians is a myth. They can do a lot of damage, they can destroy Gaza, they can kill many people, but the Palestinians are there to stay, and we are here to stay. and they have to come to terms with us and recognize our self-determination, our right to self-determination. Otherwise, they will have to keep on fighting one war after the other, and they are fighting one war after the other. They are fighting wars in Lebanon, in Syria as well, and in Iran, and in Gaza, and in the West Bank. And so they are spreading themselves across all these places and paying a high price, and they cannot continue like this, and they have to realize this better than later.
But do you think living together is still possible after everything which has happened?
This has been on my mind forever, from the very beginning. How will we live together after this? But I think we have to live together, and after this is very difficult, much more difficult than ever before. But we have to find a way, and usually after big events, big changes happen, and hopefully after this big event of the Gaza war, another big event will happen, and there will be a comprehensive solution for the problem. The problem is that the United States, which is the main supporter of Israel, rather than try to get Israel to agree to something, is supporting Israel's right-wing government and not helping at all in getting us closer to any kind of peace.
Yeah, but it might be also difficult not only for the Israelis to accept this two-state solution and living together, but for the Palestinians as well. I mean, living side by side with those who committed those terrible crimes, I guess it must be really difficult as well. I mean, that's not only on one side, but on the other as well, I guess. How do you see that?
It's very difficult, of course. But then the case of Europe, where there was so much bloodshed in the Second World War, Europe decided that there must be an end to bloodshed, and we must live together and make a union, the European Union. And they went about it, and now the countries that were fighting together 70 years ago or 76 years ago now are living with open borders. And so who would have thought after the Second World War that Germany and Britain and France would be able to find a way of living together? But they did, and it's something to think about.
Okay, so it will be an optimistic end to this not very optimistic conversation. I mean, it's not finished. Now the floor is yours. So I invite you to ask questions to our guest. We have half an hour left, so it's quite a lot of time. So if you have any questions.
So thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. My question is, you said something that I thought was both startling and beautiful, that this is about the leaders and not about the people. But I think very much of the tactics that we used, and you talked about my country, about how long it took to change in South Africa, and I think of some of the tactics that were most important and most powerful, and those were the things that touched people, like the cultural boycott, the sports boycott, the economic boycott. And I wanted to ask you what you thought about that, and perhaps in answer to your question about what we should be doing. But I wanted to ask you, particularly as a writer, what you think about those tactics.
Well, I think unless Israel feels that their policies are leading to distress and to a price, then they will not change. And now they are being boycotted, in fact, and many Israelis are finding it very difficult to travel to other countries because they are looked down upon, and some of them are being pursued with criminal cases because they have joined the army. And so already they are feeling some of the results of the actions that they've done. But then the economic boycott is very important, but we have to understand that Israel is a manufacturer of weapons, and to boycott weapons is very difficult because it involves governments. And so the economic boycott of other things would be hard-hitting, but not as hard-hitting as long as Israel's economy is dependent on weapon production. But it's important for everybody to do their little bit and express their dislike and disapproval of the Israeli tactics through boycotts and through small actions that can amount to a great deal in the future.
But I could add something to this question. What do you think about boycotting Israeli artists, people who have nothing to do, let's say, with the government's policy? This is what the war did with Russia, yes? People stopped reading Dostoevsky, stopped inviting Russian writers to the literary congresses. What do you think about doing the same with Israel?
I think that's going too far, and I think that the people who receive support from the government for their art or for their films should be boycotted, because they are receiving support for their films from the government. And otherwise, I don't see why the artists should be boycotted, even though they're Israeli.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. I just have a very simple question. I have a friend from Gaza in Warsaw, and she asked me to ask you if she can read your books in Arabic.
Very good question. Some of my books are in Arabic, but not all of them. And sometimes it's very difficult to publish in Arabic because, for example, my book on my father, we could have been friends, my father and I, has a lot of his work in 1949, and he blames a lot of on the Jordanian government for cooperating with Israel. So the Arabic publishers have been very wary about publishing it because of the possible reaction from the government. And we've had a contract with them for a long time, but they haven't had publishing. But then Palestine Walks is in Arabic, for example, and so on. Other books are in Arabic too.
Hello, I'm Bo Persson. I'm a Swedish filmmaker and member of the Swedish Pen Club. And Rajab, we met together with a Jewish Israeli friend something like 40 years ago in the old city in Jerusalem with Henry Abramovich. I think you are still more or less in touch with Henry, maybe?
Yeah, I am.
Good. I have a few questions, or one question especially, where I think to give some context to this. There was no mention of Hamas, hardly at all, except when Rajab said that it's difficult for the Palestinian Authority and Hamas to agree. But I don't know, I think you are all aware that 20 years ago Israel completely pulled out from Gaza. They even dig up the dead people from the graves and took from Gaza, yes? And it was a chance for a beginning of a Palestinian state. And what happened during these 20 years or 18 years until October 7, 2023, instead of building a Singapore in the Middle East, it became a terror state. I think Rajab would agree with me that Hamas has nothing to do with human rights, with freedom of speech, with independent judiciary, or with women's rights, or with gay rights, or anything of the sort. I mean, Hamas is probably, so my question is, with these 20 years of Hamas dictatorship over Gazan people, how is it possible for members of the PEN Club to support human rights activists from Gaza, let's say, or from the West Bank, who are committed to human rights and who obviously should be in complete disagreement with the death cult of Hamas? Who are these people we can support in Gaza? And there was, I think, also one thing I would like to add, because you said that Israel started the war one of you did. I think the lady. Of course, in 6th of October, there was no war. I know that I'm maybe in a minority here, but it doesn't mean that I cannot say what I think. I'm sorry? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Let me answer your question.
No,
let me answer your question.
Yes. But somebody says, well, what about Hamas in the West Bank? Yes, I mean, I can just. Somebody asked me about Hamas in the West Bank. I think we can ask Rajev about it. According to the Ramallah Institute for Palestinian, for making polls about opinions in Gaza, in the West Bank, given all the difficulties to do this in a good way, from what I understand, the support of Hamas is much stronger on the West Bank than in Gaza.
Pardon me, we didn't come here to listen to you. We came here to listen to the person on the stage.
You are repeating one of the big lies that have been repeated by Israel again and again. That in 2010, Israel withdrew from Gaza, and it's not true because Israel kept control of the borders and made Gaza into an open-air prison, and made a siege of Gaza and made it impossible for the Gazans to develop, and that is not doesn't mean that they withdrew. They kept their control over Gaza in a very difficult way and in a very strong way, and so it's not true. And despite this, the government in Gaza was able to build universities and build hospitals and make some development and continue with life to the extent possible.
She asked him if he could comment on the fact that on October 6th there was no war.
On October 6th, there was the Hamas came and violated the wall that had imprisoned them for 10 years, and they violated that wall and entered Israeli territories, and they were able to get some hostages out into their territory. And then Israel immediately decided that they will be fighting Hamas to the hilt. And they made a revenge war which continues until this day.
Okay, some other question.
Because we're here to discuss words, I wanted to ask you about the language of dehumanization when it comes to Palestinians, which was beautifully exemplified by the question from the Swedish, equating you with Hamas, asking you about Hamas, asking you to speak on behalf of Hamas. Could you talk a little bit about the language of dehumanization through the years?
I think Israel and supporters of Israel always try to get the Palestinians to be as though they deserve what they're getting because they are supporting terror. And terror is a word that I take great offense to because it's used so loosely all over the world now. And I think some criminal actions are criminal actions, what they are called terror actions, without justification. And so many of the supporters of Israel try to excuse Israeli actions by calling the Palestinians terrorists, and therefore they deserve what they get.
Anwar Sibai from PEN, Syria. Thank you for the rich conversation. Obviously, Israel winning the war in the short term, and they do what can do, like acting like a state above the international law. But in the long term, according to Yuval Noah Harari, who said publicly about 2 months ago, said Israel, if conquest Gaza Strip, gonna face a what they call it a spiritual crisis, not only existential crisis, spiritual crisis. What do you comment about his speculation about the future of Israel, given the fact Yuval Noah Harari, one of the most reputed historians in the world right now?
You know, the Israeli government has been trying to shield the Israeli people from the facts of what is happening in Israel. And so the popular television stations never show the destruction and the deaths that have occurred in Israel, in Gaza. And so many Israelis have never seen the destruction that has happened in Gaza. And in this way, they try to keep their allegiance to the army and to the government. But eventually, they will have to see, and then, of course, they don't allow the journalists to go in. And so the journalists cannot report on it. And so that's another way of shielding the world. And although the Palestinians are doing very well in covering it, but their words are not communicated to Israel. And eventually, when there is a ceasefire and the war ends, the Israelis will have to see what they've done, what their army has done in Gaza. And then the spiritual crisis might occur because they will see that they have killed innocent people and excellent people and writers and artists and doctors and professionals and destroyed homes and destroyed an entire community of life. You know, Gaza has been inhabited and for 3,000 years. And if they destroy Gaza now, they're destroying something that has existed for 3,000 years. And that's not something to belittle. And eventually, the Israelis will have to face what they've done in Gaza, and they will have to reckon with it. And if they don't face it, they will be reminded by the world about what they've done. Because anywhere the Israelis travel, they will be told, what have you done in Gaza? And that will be something that will not allow them to forget their sins in Gaza.
Thank you for appearing here today. Do you not feel that the point of no return regarding the international community, their feelings on this, that's already past this point of no return? Because, you know, as we see ongoing, you know, Western media constantly downplays any events that's going on in Gaza. You know, there's hundreds of children, hundreds of people dying every day in Gaza. But, you know, we'll hear, I'm not downplaying the fact that there's the war in Ukraine, but, you know, we'll hear that there's maybe 2 or 3 people have been killed in Ukraine, but there's hundreds of people, there's thousands of people being killed in Gaza. And, you know, Western media seems to constantly downplay this, you know. I just thought I'd point out, there was I just read some excerpts. There's a poem that's in Kazimierz, in the ghetto, yeah, in Kazimierz. There was the Jews about the uprising in the ghetto in Kazimierz, in Warsaw, and different places as well, these Jewish ghettos. The poem is called Resistance, and it says, to struggle for a loaf of bread was to resist. Yeah, it says to smuggle people across borders was to resist. To chronicle events and conceal the records was to resist. Yeah, it says to hold a hand out to the needy was to resist. To contact those under siege and smuggle weapons was to resist. To fight with weapons in the streets, the mountains, amid the forests was to resist. To rebel in the death camps was to resist. It says, one last point, it says, to resist, rise up in the ghettos amongst the crumbling walls. The most desperate revolt was to resist. Yeah, this was written by Jews back in the ghettos during the Second World War against the Nazis. The thing was, the Nazis tried to hide their death camps. They tried to hide what was going on regarding, you know, the annihilation of the Jews. Yeah, they tried to paint pretty pictures of the death camps. You know, that was a holiday camp. You know, we see constantly every day IDF soldiers are videoing themselves, laughing, blowing up people's houses. As you mentioned, I've seen recently about the breaking into, cantors, money exchanges, and them stealing the money. They're blazingly doing this. So that's what I'm saying. I think now we've reached a point of no return. With the West.
I think that you're right that the media, the official media, has failed the Palestinians and are part of the genocide because they are covering it up. The BBC, for example, is very guilty of this because the BBC is one station that I follow. And the American media are also likewise. But there have been changes in all this media, slightly to the better. And in this day and age, the media, official media is not all in everything. There is social media, and social media is very informative for most people about what is happening in Gaza. And so the information tends to go around, and we hear it, and people see it, and the dependence on the official media is less and less, and that's very important, very good. As to your poem on the resistance and the ghetto, I think it's very relevant for today. Thank you for it.
Thank you very much. My name is Mina Sabit. Thank you very much for your sincere answers and for sharing your experiences that you have been living through. So I would like to ask you about the weaponization of victimhood and how the weaponization of victimhood have been manifested in Palestine and to dehumanize Palestinians and to cover up for the crimes of colonializing Palestine, not only now at the moment, but since 1948. How that, in your experience, how that manifested in the Palestinian experience, and how that been used widely to cover up what is happening now in Gaza, especially in the media as well.
Yeah, the weaponization of, for example, food and starvation has been very strong now, and that's the latest in the cases of weaponization. And all along, yes, Israel has been weaponizing the suffering and so on, and that is a failure of Israel in dealing with the humanity of the Palestinians, and was possible because of the dehumanization of the Palestinians, and the dehumanization of the Palestinians is not something that happened only since the Gaza war, but has been going on for a long time before. And the fact that they could ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from Palestine in 1948 and not feel guilty about taking over the homes of the Palestinians in what was Palestine also is part of it.
I'm sorry to come back, but my question was around victimhood, the weaponization of victimhood of the Jews in Europe, and how that weaponization of victimhood have been used to cover up the crimes that Israel has been doing, or Israel has been doing in Palestine.
Yeah, Israel has been constantly using the Holocaust to justify what's happening in Palestine. And the Holocaust is one thing, and what's happening in Palestine is another. And so it's a terrible thing to use the Holocaust to justify other crimes when the most important lesson of the Holocaust is never again. And Israel doesn't say never again to anybody, never again to Jews, which is a degradation of the Holocaust and the important lesson of the Holocaust. And Israel is very careful to keep the knowledge and the propaganda about the Holocaust, and always to use it to justify what's happening, saying that we who suffered in the Holocaust cannot possibly do what people are saying we're doing into the Palestinians. And that's, of course, not true and nonsense.
أهلا وسهلا في بولندا. الله يعطيك العافية. عمو, can you tell us I froze to the news when I heard that Trump wants to sanction Al-Mazan wal-Haq. What's the rest of the news apart of that? What are the consequences? And what's going to happen with the Hague and the tribunal and all that?
You mean the sanctioning of Al-Haq?
Yeah.
Well, you know, Al-Haq has been they tried to stop it before by calling the people terrorists and terrorist organization and the directory terrorists and so on, and the funders of Al-Haq and other organizations in the West Bank, it's not only Al-Haq, other human rights organizations, stopped funding these organizations. And then Israel was unable to provide any evidence for their claim that they are terrorists and they take part in terrorist activities. And then all the funders returned the funding and continued to fund the organization. But now the American government is trying another tactic, which is that sanctioning the organization. And the sanctioning will be very difficult to combat, because all the banks have to support the sanction of the Al-Haq, and so Al-Haq will have to find other ways to get their monies into the, but they will find and they will continue, and there's no question that the Al-Haq will continue because it's a fighter organization and it has won other battles in the past and it will win this battle. And the support around the world for Al-Haq is so strong that I think the people will not allow, the funders and the other human rights organizations will not allow Al-Haq to stop, because it plays a very important role in the fight for human rights.
Are there any other questions? Yes?
Thank you so much for this conversation. My question would be about the future. You already touched on that, how difficult it will be to live together between Israelis and Palestinians when the genocide ends. But I would like to ask you, do you have an opinion or a conviction what would be the ideal scenario? Like, would it be two-state solution, or is the two-state solution even possible? Because I haven't ever been in Israel or Palestine, but as I understand it, that both people, like geographically, already live in both territories as they are designated at the moment. Or would it be one state where everyone lives together and has everyone has the same rights equally? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
I think the important thing is self-determination for the Palestinians and for both people. And then two states is an important thing, because it has been the policy of all governments, most governments, for a long time, and it's something that has been worked on and developed very well over the years, and to leave it now is not good. But the idea of most people is that a state will have to be separate from the other state and borders and so on. When the 1947 partition scheme was made, there were people of both ethnicities in both parts of the states that were Israel and Palestine. And the borders were not strict, and there was economic cooperation. This is according to the partition scheme. And so if there is a resolution on the basis of two states, then it doesn't have to be that the states are separated by walls, and they can be full cooperation, economic cooperation, and people from one ethnicity or one nationality can live in the state of the other, but equal rights. The important thing is equal rights for both people.
Yes, I think it's going to be maybe the last question, or one. Oh, you, and then we'll stop.
My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I'm president of PEN Ukraine. And when I look at the footages of Gaza, and when I look at the destroyed houses, when I see the testimonies of people, I recognize what we are going through. At the same time, and therefore, I think for communities, for nations that are going through these very tragic and difficult moments of time, the empathy, the solidarity is a natural thing, the solidarity of suffering. Because the very word empathy, compassion, means suffering with, right? what worries me is the kind of this competition of suffering which exists in the international media and in politics. I'm just wondering, okay, people are making their political choices, right? But can we, the cultural community, overcome these political choices? Can we get together and name evil evil? When it is a war crime of Israel against Gaza, call it a war crime. When it is a war crime of Russia against Ukraine, call it a war crime. Because my concern is that, you know, people take sides, and this taking sides sometimes is very, very political. What do you think?
Well, I think that you're right that people should call war crime, and there cannot be any distinction, and that's very important, and culturally very important to empathize with the other, and yeah.
So the last question.
Thank you. It's more of a confirmation than a question, because you have said something that is very hopeful from my point of view. I want to thank both of you for this enlightening conversation. I heard you for the first time. I am Carles Tourné from Barcelona, Vice President of PEN International. I heard you for the first time in New York at the World Voices Festival when you presented Palestinian works. And it was very useful for me when then with Jennifer Clement, President of PEN International, we visited the West Bank to support Palestinian writers. And you have said that even in this tragic situation today in the West Bank, and of course in the Gaza Strip, that you keep on writing your diary every day, and that you keep on writing. Just want you to confirm that apart from the gardening and listening to music, you keep on writing every day.
I absolutely do, because I cannot end the day without writing about it, because I feel the day is not complete unless I write my diary for that day. So yes, I am continuing, and despite everything, and you know, the diary that I write is not just political diary or documentation. It's a diary of my feelings about what is happening, and my reactions, and my emotions, and my anger, and my hopes. And so it's a rich account that I find. I write it and don't read it and put it away, and then when I read it later on, I realize what I had been thinking about, and that's very useful, very important. And so yes, you're right. I am continuing with the diary every day, and it's a huge number of.
Thank you very much. I think this is the good ending point. And you will have an occasion to meet once again with Rają Shehadehem tomorrow. He will be signing his book. Where exactly?
In Tarłowska bookshop at 11 tomorrow. You are welcome.
So thank you very much. Thank you.